Hit me.
Welcome to the Senior Rehab Podcast,
The podcast for rehab clinicians that want to better serve older adults.
And now, your host, Dustin Jones.
Shorts. Hello, friends. This week's Senior Rehab Short is from our good friend and great writer, Neil Maltby. His blog is at becomingmorehumanblog.wordpress.com, and his post that will be read today is Regression to the Shmean. It was posted on February 2nd, 2016. Every so often, I get one of these people to leave my clinic after a period of rehabilitation. Thanks so much. You've made such a difference. I wish they'd sent me 6 years ago. This leaves me in a predicament. There feels a genuine change, but I've been trained to be suspect of treatment results. Regression to the mean has become a new buzzword in healthcare. It predicts that if an extreme measure is taken, then the next measure will tend to be nearer the mean, regardless of whether the initial measure was under or over the mean. Interesting. So should I dismiss the above effect? Regression to the mean is a statistical phenomenon, giving population data. It has uses, but in isolation is reductionist. This is one concern with pure statistical interpretation of complexity. The world is reduced to numbers for our benefit, to take out the humanness and be left with reality, in quotes, or metaphysicality, a dubious claim. Statistics is bound to describe the world in numbers only, the world in black and white, two-dimensional. Only in complexity can we see the world in color. Where does it work best? A good example is if you get 100 students to sit a blinded multiple choice test, then repeat the next day. We expect the higher and lower scores to become less extreme and those around the mean to be more divergent. Repeat the test, unblinded, and the effect is much less pronounced. The results less random or down to chance. Another example would be simple objective data such as inherited height, which formed part of the initial idea by Sir Francis Galton. Let's start with terminology. Often it is easy to mistake regression with resolution. We know regression to the mean is not resolution because regression needs to occur in both directions, towards the mean, some better, some worse. This does not describe resolution. Resolution continues a tendency toward improvement or resolution with multiple readings. Regression to the mean does not. It fluctuates around its own mean. So terminology clear, where do we go next? Until we give treatments a rough time when they have unknown mechanism, rightly so, we want to know why and how. Regression to the mean works best with random, unorganized data. The less random the data, the less regression to the mean observed. In this view, there is no causal attribution, just random stochastic variation. In cases of simple characteristics like height, we know at least part of the regression process through gene sequencing in inheritance. But what about pain? Do we know the mechanism of regression to the mean or resolution? Is it always the same? Is each resolution equal? Does the frequency of regression change? I often see people who have had a previous episode of pain and who have seen some resolution through avoidance strategies, behavioral adaptation, reduced daily effort. This is surely different to someone who resolved with good activity levels and less maladaptive beliefs. These qualitative differences are washed out with simple statistics. Have we backed ourselves into a corner? Using regression to the mean as a convenient takedown of alternative medicine, easy to disengage, a sort of cognitive dissonance. If it works in the short term, it's placebo. If it works in the long term, it's regression to the mean. But where does it leave us? Over-reliant on a statistical view of the world. This is not an apologetic for alternative medicine, rather a call for a deeper understanding. Mechanisms could include subjective symptoms, like pain, being a byproduct of consciousness. Our consciousness is finite and in demand. This could lead to variation around a mean. Long-term outcomes interfered by competing demands for consciousness. Stress, anxiety, other health issues, life. We might provide temporary scaffolding with our treatments, but do we see life changes? This is an excellent example of how regression actually helps us to engage in a more human level, but we should be careful to investigate its mechanism. Otherwise, regression becomes a magic homogenizing process. The data is gathered at a population level, therefore tells us little of an individual. It relies on a mean, an average, a normal. It assumes each person equal regardless of context. Their regression or resolution determined by pathology rather than person, unable to compare to an alternative We can't know how they may fluctuate other than using previous experience to inform. This is frowned on by groups of certain statisticians for risk of bias. They much prefer amalgamating a load of data from a population than assuming each person from 1 to 100th percentile on the continuum is being average or mean. How accurate can this be? How wise not to use a prior reasoning? Maybe a discussion for a different day. Statistics view the complexity of the world as disorganized when in fact social sciences generally accepts that social reality is best viewed as organized complexity. It is obsessed with linear modeling as this makes life easy to interpret, but at what cost in understanding? Complex causality is superseded by natural variation. This leads to determinism. If we are not careful, regression or resolution are examples of where useful data can reduce people to numbers. People lose out to science. Mean statistics cloak human variety. Depersonalized treatment approved in randomized controlled trials assumes situational approach, i.e., putting each individual through the same situation or context will achieve the best results. This seems to be a foundation for much of healthcare. Deterministic reasoning, such as if we can determine the pathology and determine, through randomized controlled trials, most effective treatment, all our healthcare problems are solved. Unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be the case. Factors outside the external context seem to matter greatly, i.e., the internal context, the person. I've seen regression to the mean used to explain treatment effects. This person sees you at their worst, so can only improve. This may be true of some private clinics, but often people arrive in clinics 4 to 6 weeks from onset, if we are lucky. So it is a misguided assumption to say we see them at their worst. Another call to put away the blankets and actually think, like humans do. Using a bit of deep human thinking, not robot processing, we can see the above case study did not fit regression to the mean principles, neither natural resolution after a 6-year history. Clinically, regression to the mean does happen, but is quite obvious. They are the people who fluctuate both ways with no real improvement. Resolution is a bit trickier. Our healthcare profession should be quick to note that we may influence the context of environment for progress, but do not provide the magic of resolution. Do away with blanket thinking. Be more human, be less robot. Thanks, Neil. Hit me. I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. The show notes and much, much more can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. I want to encourage you to go there so you can join me and many others in the movement that's changing the face of geriatric rehab. Just go to seniorrehabproject.com, click join, and you'll be able to get access to our private Facebook group, which can basically serve as your virtual mastermind group. You'll get a short and sweet monthly email from me with useful links for you and your patients. And lastly, you'll get 10% off your first purchase from the Senior Rehab store. So all of this can be found at seniorrehabproject.com. And until next time, my friends, do not forget to stay funky.